Good afternoon, I'm Donald McFarland with Americans United for Change in Minnesota. I'm joined today by Alliance for a Better Minnesota and the Minnesota AFL-CIO to unveil a new television ad urging Governor Tim Pawlenty to do his legal duty and certify the United States Senate election results should Al Franken be declared the winner by the Minnesota Supreme Court. The ad spotlights the National Republican Party's continued and sustained efforts to stand in the way of Minnesota's urgently needed and rightful representation in the United States Senate, and asks Governor Pawlenty if he will act in the best interests of the people of Minnesota or his own national political ambitions. A recent poll from Alliance for a Better Minnesota found that 64% of Minnesotans would have serious doubts about Tim Pawlenty if he were to refuse to sign a certificate of election, as he is legally required, if the Minnesota Supreme Court declares Al Franken the winner in the United States Senate contest. During these extraordinarily difficult economic times that are each day leaving more Minnesotans without jobs, homes, and health care, we cannot afford to be without full representation in Congress a day longer. But while the vast majority of Minnesotans agree it is time to move on, and that the recount in the election between Norm Coleman and Al Franken has been conducted fairly and impartially from the start, the real decision is for Governor Pawlenty. The governor, who has exhibited clear ambition for higher office, is under an incredible amount of pressure from national Republicans to deny Minnesotans their rightful and urgently needed representation in the Senate for as long as possible. Even as Senator John Cornyn has said for years. When the time comes, likely in June, Governor Pawlenty will have a clear choice. Will he do his legal duty and act in the best interests of Minnesota by certifying Al Franken as our next United States Senator, or will he continue to act in the interests of the National Republican Party and his own personal political ambitions? At this time, I'd like to introduce Joe Davis from Alliance for a Better Minnesota. Joe?
Last week, after the state Supreme Court announced their June 1st trial date, Alliance for Better Minnesota put a poll in the field to see how Minnesotans felt about the ongoing Senate election contest. We polled on the recount, the appeal, and Pawlenty's shifting rhetoric on signing the election certificate, and in all cases, the results were overwhelmingly clear. Our poll found that 2/3 of Minnesotans have been paying close attention to this race, and 6 in 10 feel that the recount has been conducted in a fair, accurate, and transparent manner. Because of this, the recount, Minnesotans think that 6 in 10 Minnesotans think that Al Franken should be our next senator. Minnesotans also take a no-nonsense view towards Tim Pawlenty's recent hedging on signing the election certificate for Al Franken. Over 60% of Minnesotans would have doubts about Tim Pawlenty if he did not sign the election certificate. The number is 40%, even amongst self-identified Republicans. The poll results are clear. Minnesotans believe that this has been an election undertaken in the great tradition of Minnesota elections. It has been fair, accurate, and transparent, and a clear majority believe that Al Franken has won. They want Tim Pawlenty to follow the letter of the law, sign the election certificate, should the Supreme Court rule to seat Al Franken, and not try and score points with national Republican leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. At this time, we'll show the actual ad.
Most Minnesotans, including Republicans, believe that once the state Supreme Court rules, Governor Pawlenty should do his legal duty and certify Al Franken as our senator. But the national Republican donors don't want Minnesota to have our rightful representation in the Senate. The Republican campaign chairman, Texas Senator Cornyn, said Norm Coleman's court challenges could take years to resolve. Now Governor Pawlenty has a choice. Will he act in the best interest of Minnesota or his own national political ambitions?
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Laura Aston with the Minnesota AFL-CIO. Laura?
Thank you, Donald. As we've heard, a vast majority of Minnesotans want Coleman to concede and want Governor Pawlenty to sign the certificate. Right now, the most important decisions probably of my lifetime are being debated and discussed in Washington, D.C. In the midst of an economic crisis and in the changing face of healthcare, Minnesota is one senator short. We're calling on Governor Pawlenty to do his legal duty. Once the Minnesota Supreme Court makes its final ruling, Governor Pawlenty will need to stop dragging his feet, stop trying to please a few Republican donors, and let Minnesota have its full representation in Washington, D.C. by signing the election certificate. It's time for the governor to choose to put Minnesota ahead of his own political ambitions. Do your legal duty, Governor Pawlenty, and sign the election certificate. Do it for the people of Minnesota. Let us have a full voice in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. We're all available for questions if you have any, and I want to thank you all for coming. Thank you.